There's a question most people never think to ask themselves. It's not, who am I, but where am I? Where do you actually live right now on the map of your own consciousness? Because here's what 50 years of depth psychology has taught me. It's much harder to navigate a journey when you don't know your starting point. Today, we're going to find out together. I'm Linda, your guide through your inner and outer lives. And yes, I'm a real person. I mention that because in a world full of AI voices, I think it matters that you know there's someone genuinely here with you. For over 5 decades, I've done one thing: taken the hardest ideas in depth psychology, Jung, Campbell, the ancient philosophers, and translated them into something you can actually use today. Real tools, a real map. No jargon, no fluff, just the real thing. Everything I'm showing you today, the Transcend Group Wheel, the Soul Archetypes card deck, is completely free. The download link is in the description. Grab it before we're done, and you can follow along as we go. Over the last 7 videos in this Individuation series, we've been building your inner map using 3 soul suits that define 3 relationships of your life. Today, we step outside the deck entirely and meet the tool that holds all of it together. That's the wheels. Have you ever found yourself doing all the right things? Meditating, journaling, reading, showing up for therapy or coaching, and still feel like you're spinning in place? That feeling usually has a very specific cause. You're working hard, but you may be working in the wrong quadrant or even the wrong wheel entirely. The inner life isn't one territory. It's a labyrinth with distinct regions. And the inner work that heals you in one region is completely different from the work that heals you in another. In Jungian psychology, this is where self-discovery gets precise. Carl Jung's individuation process isn't about doing more inner work. It's about doing the right inner work in the right place at the right time. That's what these wheels are for. They show you exactly where you are, so you know exactly what kind of work comes next. These wheels map the 12 defining characteristics of the 2 worlds you live in simultaneously, the spirit world and the physical world. Each wheel has 4 quadrants. Each quadrant holds one defining characteristic of your experience. On the light blue left side are spiritual energy forms, your immortal nature, your deeper identity. On the terracotta-colored right side are physical energy forms. That's your mortality, your life in the material world. For a deep dive into all 12 characteristics, see the companion video linked in the description, Spiritual World versus Physical, 12 Defining Characteristics. The specific wheel we're working with today is the Transcend Group Wheel. It lets you see visually how your identity relates to your consciousness, how the pieces of yourself, your experiences, your wounds, your gifts connect to each other so you can begin to move toward wholeness. This is the core promise of Carl Jung's individuation, and this wheel makes it visible. It contains the 4 characteristics most directly connected to your ability to transcend, to climb from the lower planes of the material world toward the higher spiritual planes of who you truly are. These 4 elements are reality, identity, consciousness, and the life path. Now, before we go further, I want to show you something sitting right on the cards that most people never notice. Every card in the states of consciousness has a goal printed on it, and those goals tell the entire story of what the individuation process actually is. They are become, aware, thrive, awake, discover, transcend, and whole. 8 destinations on a single journey. Today, I want to show you all 8 and help you find out which one you're standing in right now. And remember, this is yours. Free download, link below. You don't need to memorize the map tonight. You just need to know where to find it. I want to start with the conscious quadrant, the lower right section of the wheel, because where you are on the consciousness map is the single most important thing you can know about yourself right now. The states of consciousness were introduced in the video Jung versus Freud, Beyond the Johari Window. If you haven't seen it, the link is in the description. It's the foundation for everything we're mapping today. To summarize, Carl Jung divided consciousness into 2 broad territories. The first is what most of us think of as simply being aware, what he called the conscious, also known as the ordinary conscious. The second is everything below the surface, the unconscious. And here's what makes Jung's map so different from anything before it. He didn't treat the unconscious as a problem to manage. He treated it as a destination to explore, because that's where your wholeness is hiding. To represent each state, I created a personal symbol system inspired by one of the oldest concepts in human history, the Magnum Opus. The Magnum Opus, that's Latin for great work, was the alchemist term for transforming base metals like lead into gold. But the ancient philosophers understood it as something far more personal. That's the transformation of the ordinary self into something whole, luminous, and authentic. The living opus is where you are right now, your current location on the map. It is never finished, it is always becoming. I've drawn on that tradition to create visual landmarks, trail markers, and signposts for each state of consciousness on the wheel. When you recognize one, you know exactly where you are. Let's start where most of us live. That's ordinary consciousness. A basic definition for consciousness is to be aware. So awareness is the goal here. On the card, I represent this state with a checkerboard. You may recognize this image from Lewis Carroll's Alice Through the Looking Glass. In this sequel, Alice doesn't fall down a rabbit hole. She steps through the mirror. And on the other side, she finds herself in a world that operates like a giant chess game. Pieces moving according to rules she didn't choose, and a landscape she didn't design. She is a pawn in someone else's story, until the moment she starts asking, why? Most of us spend the majority of our lives here, going through the motions, following social scripts, responding to the world's demands, work, obligations, family roles we stepped into before we were old enough to choose them. None of this is wrong, but if you never look up from the chessboard and ask, who set this game up, and do I actually want to play it? You may reach the end of your life having played someone else's game the entire time. In depth psychology, this recognition, this moment of waking up inside the chessboard, is often the very beginning of the individuation process. On the wheel, ordinary consciousness divides into 2 parts, one personal, one collective. Both are within the terracotta color of physical energy. Carl Jung's work implies the ordinary conscious was never just one territory, and I followed his lead in naming them. Think of it this way. There is a consciousness you experience privately as an individual, and the consciousness you share with everyone around you. They feel similar from the inside, but they operate very differently. Let me show you what I mean. The personal conscious is a reflection of Jung's personal unconscious. It's the part of you that thinks, reasons, plans, and makes decisions in real time. It holds your personal beliefs, your current understanding of your values, and your working sense of who you are, but on the surface. The goal here is to thrive, to take what you know about yourself and use it to build a life that actually fits you. On the wheel, this slice is yellow. It's associated with your personal, individual life as experienced in your soulless person. The card symbol is a black and white square divided diagonally, 2 halves. This represents the divided nature of your two energies as a human, your spiritual and physical energies living side by side in every moment. It also reflects the way you naturally perceive the world in binary opposites, right and wrong, safe and dangerous, mine and yours. This isn't a flaw. Binary thinking is practical. It keeps us functional. But it is also by itself incomplete. The full picture, the one you're building through this inner work, is never just black and white. The collective conscious is larger than any one person. It's the shared consciousness of your family, your culture, your generation, the assumptions and social norms that the group agrees on without ever saying them aloud, absorbed before you were old enough to even question them. The goal here is simply to survive, to belong, to be accepted. The symbol is the checkerboard broken apart, squares tumbling in from every direction, chaotic and uncoordinated, because social pressure doesn't come at you in an organized line. It comes from everywhere at once before you have words for it. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the herd. In Jungian psychology, it's where the false self performs, wearing the persona, playing to social expectations every single day. On the wheel, red marks this territory. That's your virtual soul, the life you share with others. Together, the personal and collective conscious are the world most of us navigate every day. And together, they raise the most important question on this entire wheel. Which version of you is actually running the show? To answer that, we go somewhere most people are afraid to look, into the unconscious. Most people spend their entire lives on the edges of the map, the conscious states, the world they can see and name and manage. But below that surface, and the direction most people avoid, is where the real geography begins, the unconscious, the altered states of consciousness. This includes both extraordinary experiences and the ordinary ones of your inner life, even when you don't recognize them. Carl Jung divided the unconscious into 2 states, the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. On the wheel, you see I've added a third, the superconscious. That's drawn from the hidden quadrant of the Johari window. All 3 are coded blue. Blue because they all belong to the spirit soul. These are the territories where your deepest, most spiritual work actually happens. The symbol for the unconscious on the card is a 4-sided pyramid containing a maze. The pyramid represents the ancient symbol of your inner life, grounded in the earth but pointing toward heaven. But inside it is a labyrinth, because awakening to your inner world isn't a straight path. It requires you to navigate, to turn back, to try again. If you've ever started inner work and found it harder than you expected, now you know why. The labyrinth is the point, not the problem. This is where the journey inward begins, and it begins the moment you ask, what is actually going on inside me? The entire unconscious inner world is accessed through this door. What lies beyond it is some of the richest and most transformative territory in all of depth psychology. The goal here is to discover the pieces of yourself that you have hidden and maybe even forgotten. Have you ever had a memory surface, completely unprompted, that you thought you'd dealt with years ago? That's the personal unconscious reminding you it keeps its own records. The symbol is a gray triangle. Gray because what feels sharply black and white in the material world becomes more complex, more nuanced when you look at it honestly. Your personal unconscious holds the memories, emotions, and experiences you have pushed below the surface. The things that felt too painful, too confusing, or too shameful to look at directly. Carl Jung called the collection of these hidden pieces the shadow. We'll meet the shadow fully in a future video. It deserves the complete treatment. A link will appear in the description when it does. If the personal unconscious is what you've pushed down, the collective unconscious is something you were born into, but requires dedicated courage to explore. The goal at this state is to transform duality into oneness, to transform competition into cooperation, and to transform the pieces of your soul into wholeness. Carl Jung described it as the layer of the mind we all share, a vast, invisible reservoir holding universal symbols, primordial memories, and the Jungian archetypes inherited by all of humanity. The symbol I've chosen is interlocking puzzle pieces, because this is the stage where the scattered fragments of yourself begin to find each other and fit together. The ancient Egyptians told this story 4,000 years ago. Set, the god of chaos, murdered his brother Osiris, the god of wholeness, and scattered his body into 14 pieces across the world. And it was Isis who journeyed to gather every fragment. When Osiris was restored, he returned as something more than he had ever been before. That story is not mythology from a distance. It's your story. The puzzle pieces on this card are Isis's work, the scattered pieces of yourself, gathered and made whole. A third unconscious state was suggested in the hidden quadrant of the Johari window. This is explored in the Johari window to your soul video and linked in the description. This state is the superconscious. It also appears in the spirit soul and is blue. Its goal is simple: wholeness. On the cards, I represent it with the monad, the symbol for both the center and the all-encompassing endless edge, the alpha and the omega, the origin from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. In Jungian psychology, the superconscious is where the self-archetype lives, the organizing principle of your entire psyche, the whole that both contains all the parts, the outer circle, and is also the center, the dot. This is the destination of the individuation process. Hold that image, the monad, the still center. That is where we are all ultimately headed. Most people only touch this state in fragments, a moment of inexplicable peace in the middle of a hard season, a sudden clarity that dissolves a problem you've been carrying for years. the stillness that sometimes arrives at the end of genuine prayer or grief or deep creative work. You've been there. You just may not have had a name for it. Now let's move to the identity quadrant. That's the upper right section of the wheel. In the earlier videos of this series, you were introduced to the 3 layers of your soul using the soul archetype cards. These layers are your virtual soul, using the theater set and the drama triangle. Your soul as person, using the Odyssey set and the myth of Odysseus. Your spirit soul, using the observer set and the Egyptian gods. All links are in the description and the pinned comment below. At the start of this video, I gave you 7 words: survive, aware, thrive, awake, discover, transform, and whole. Now let's look at where we've been. First, the conscious states: survive, aware, thrive. They're all mapped. The unconscious states of awake, discover, transform, and whole. These are all mapped also. Now on the Transcend Group Wheel, we can see both the identity and consciousness quadrants at once, and how they relate to each other. On the right side of the identity quadrant, the terracotta physical side, lives your false self. I want to pause on that phrase because false self can sound harsh, like an accusation. It isn't. It was built out of survival. The very human need to belong, to be safe, to be loved. When a child learns that certain emotions aren't welcome, whether it's anger, grief, or deep need, they build a version of themselves that the world around them can accept. If you've lost contact with who you actually are beneath that performance, I call this spiritual amnesia. You've forgotten who you were created to be. You know someone living there. They have the career, the relationships, the status, and still carry that persistent, quiet feeling that something essential is missing. That hollowness is spiritual amnesia. The drama triangle in your virtual soul lives entirely on this side. That is not an accident. The drama triangle is the psychology of the false self in action. And notice that red energies spill slightly into the yellow of your soulless person, into the body. The false self doesn't just shape how you relate to others, it shapes how you live inside your own skin. On the light blue left side of the identity quadrant, the spiritual side, live the 2 expressions of your true self. Your soulless person in yellow, the Wayfinder, and the 4 archetypes who travel with her, the seeker, the dreamer, the curious, and the pilgrim. Only the pilgrim body contains physical energy. And your spirit soul in blue, the observer, and her inner council of Egyptian guides, the sage, the creator, the explorer, and the guide. Here's what I want you to notice. The Wayfinder is the traveler. She's in motion, searching, questioning, willing to leave the comfortable and familiar in pursuit of something real. The observer is something deeper still. She watches, she witnesses, she holds the tension of your entire inner life without collapsing or absorbing the drama energy. Have you ever had a moment, maybe just a few seconds, where the noise stopped, where you weren't performing for anyone, weren't managing anyone's feelings, weren't worrying about what came next, where you just were? That wasn't emptiness, that was contact. That was the true self, briefly unobstructed. Your true self isn't a destination you arrive at once and stay forever. It is the direction you orient toward when the false self begins to loosen its grip. And now, with the consciousness and identity quadrants both mapped, we can ask the question the entire wheel was built to answer, which is this: can you find your exact address on this map right now? Let me show you how. You already know the primary colors: red for virtual soul, yellow for soulless person, and blue for spirit soul. And the 4 elements: orange for intellect, purple for emotion, green for will, and brown for body. These run consistently across every card and every wheel. Here's what this looks like in practice. Imagine you've been turning the same problem over and over in your mind for days, analyzing it, second-guessing it, running it again and again. That's orange, intellect energy working overtime. Or you sense it in your body before you have words for it: a tightness, a pull, a sudden exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. That's brown, the body registering what the mind hasn't caught up to yet. The color doesn't just tell you where you are on the map, it tells you which part of yourself is trying to get your attention right now. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now here's where everything we've built together starts to click into place. Every card in the Soul Archetypes deck lives somewhere on these 3 wheels. Every single one. The back of each card contains its coordinates, the specific quadrant, and defining characteristic it belongs to. When you pull a card and turn it over, you're not just reading a description. You are locating yourself on the map. Think of it this way: the deck is your compass. Each wheel is a country on the life map. Let's use the Explorer card in the Observer set as an example. On the card front, the blue bar tells you the soul suit is Spirit Soul. The TG badge in the upper corner tells you it belongs to the Transcend Group. That's your first coordinate. Now flip the card over. The middle row gives you 2 critical pieces of information: the color green for the will element and the group name Transcend within the identity characteristic quadrant. With those 2 pieces of information, soul suit, element, and quadrant, you can place yourself precisely on the wheel. We've mapped consciousness and identity, where you operate from, and who you think you are. But one question remains: how do you actually move? Carl Jung called the answer the transcendent function, a living force that emerges when 2 opposites are held in tension long enough for something new to appear between them. In the next video, we place it on this wheel. The crossing begins here. If this video has helped you see yourself a little more clearly today, I have a question for you in the comments. Where do you think you live right now on this wheel? Are you in the ordinary conscious, the chessboard? Or are you starting to sense the personal unconscious pulling at you? Or maybe somewhere else entirely? Tell me below. Your answer matters, and it might help someone else recognize where they are. If you haven't already, grab the free Soul Archetype card deck and all 3 wheels in the description. Every card shows you its exact coordinates on the Transcend Group Wheel, so you can start locating yourself on the map, not just reading about it. And if this video gave you something real, please like it and share it with someone who's searching. That's how this work reaches the people who need it most. I'm Linda, and I'll see you in the next video, where the real crossing begins.